Hi all, Steve Mera here and welcome to another episode of NHI Discussions. And in this particular video, we're going to be taking a little bit more of a deep dive into the Scole Experiment, simply because a huge amount of people asked so many questions in regards to our previous video on Project Enigma about the Scole Experiment and what actually took place. This is taking a little bit more of that deep dive into the specific area of the UAP or UFO manifestations, and even a strange cosmos that manifested in the experimental room, the cellar at Scole, which interacted with the individuals. Now, I am good friends and colleagues with Nick Kyle and his wife Sarah, who took part in those experiments of the Scole, and what they witnessed was pretty mind-blowing, to be honest with you. Though I have witnessed some of these strange things myself, certainly not to the scale of the manifestation process of Scole, but NHI we succeeded or exceeded on, should we say, in regards to Scole. But it's pretty mind-boggling stuff, and even some of the stuff I've witnessed through these experiments keeps you up at night. It really does. It's pretty life-altering. You start to question about the world, reality, and everything around us. But it happened. And that's what's so significant about this. It's crazy, but I want you to be able to see and hear of this firsthand from Nick and Sarah. Now, what they've experienced is nothing less than fantastic, to be honest with you. And I would have loved to have been party to that, but I have been party to other things, so I do know those sort of things do happen. What they are about to tell you will be split into two videos because it's a pretty long discussion, but I do hope you enjoy it, and please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Give it a thumbs up because it's really important. A lot of people are sort of saying, how come your channel don't get that many views and this, that and the other? Well, you know, there probably is some suppression going on in regarding this material for sure. Doesn't surprise me in the slightest, but any help you can give, then please do so. Give it a thumbs up, share, like it. Enjoy the video, and we will be back to you very soon. Thank you. First off, you know, with the critical parts of Scole of experience, like you've mentioned before, the manifestation of certain things that you've witnessed, the interactions that you've had, the light phenomena, and other things as well. When was that actually taking place? Was that in, I would say, the latter 1990s? Or would I be right by saying that?
Yes.
You would be able to say.
Yeah, it was towards the end of the 1990s.
1996.
So after 97, it was then.
Right. So this incident then took place after the general sittings and the manifestations of certain apports and newspapers and things like that. Is that like so? It was after that, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So because we're aware that obviously the Society of Psychical Research came in and conducted some of their own investigations, and I have to admit, I quite enjoy watching their frustration. And that's the best way I could put it, in an attempt to rationalize the experiences. But the more people that were introduced to the Scole, the more, am I right by saying this, the more people experience phenomena? Am I right by saying that?
Yeah, there were approximately 30 odd sittings, and roughly a similar number of scientists from all over Europe and the UK who attended, and most of them went on the record to say they experienced light phenomena and things that were perplexing for them. Putting out the founder president of the Scottish SPR, the Reverend Archibald E. Roy, who said that he experienced two things that were evidential. One is the light phenomena, the trajectory, the high speed manipulation of orbs. And secondly, he said that he spoke to the mediums who brought through another astronomer, because Archer was an astronomer, and Archie said to me privately, there are maybe 6 people in the world who could talk in conversation about the particular subject, and the deceased communicator was one of them.
Right.
So he was impressed by that. But other scientists have gone on record as saying, I've been a professor of electrical engineering and a professor of physics and so on, and I experience things that are beyond my ability to understand.
Right.
And one of the things that happened, which is maybe not scientific, but certainly a matter of skill, is I was speaking to a couple of special effects guys who worked for Sony. Now, they weren't at school, but I met them through film work that I did. And I said to them, guys, let me describe a room to you, and let me ask you if you can recreate the phenomenon. And in particular, I said to them, not just orbs moving around, but people manifesting. And they said, no, we couldn't replicate that. And once I described it in detail, and I said, why not? I said, I'll give you an unlimited amount of money. Of course, it was a bit of a up job because I didn't have the millions that we're talking about. And the guy said to me very patiently, you're not listening, Nick. We need 3 large oil-dampened camera platforms in which to project holographic images that match up exactly. If you don't do that, you get double edges and you get fuzziness, and we lose the quality of the image the faster the movement is. You're describing movements that were like an arrow firing, and he said, and what would happen is that the person would blur during that movement. He said, but you said that wasn't seen to happen. He said, but worse than that, he said, these platforms are about the size of a large stuffed armchair.
Oh.
There was no space in that little room for 14 chairs and a coffee table in the centre, and 1 or 2 trolleys for Robin for his music. And other than that, there wasn't space to walk round the group because it was in a small brick-built cellar. He said, so there was no room for these projectors. He said, and the reason why they have to be oil dampened is because if a truck passed 100 yards away on the open road, the vibration would go through the ground and up into the holographic projector.
Right.
He said, but there's another reason why we couldn't replicate it. You describe items that went under tables, up through tables, round about people's legs, and they didn't lose their intensity, the luminosity. He said, we need constant direct line of sight that's not blocked by legs of furniture. And if you don't get that, you get only 2 projectors trying to capture a 3D image, and you can tell the difference.
Yes. So
having got that explanation, I'm prepared to accept that I wasn't in some high-tech experience. That I was seeing something that couldn't be faked by the best technicians at that time. And even today, I think there would be a similar concern raised.
Yes.
Back then, I thought when we went into the darkened room, and I had checked it beforehand, concrete floor, brick-built cellar, I examined every aspect of the room. There was only one thing that was slightly unusual, and that was a small wooden chute. That was the bottom end of a coal chute, where a delivery of coal would be made. And I manipulated it and assured myself that there was no way that could come off and not be noticed, seen, or heard. With that sole exception, everything in the room seemed to be straightforward. The furniture, plastic sort of metal framed chairs and so on. There was nothing strange or unusual. But if I was extremely skeptical, I'd be saying, and were the mediums intimate research? And the answer is no, they weren't. We were their guests and they were the hosts. So while they didn't go about in bulky clothing that could disguise a lot of stuff, it would still be an extreme
Mm.
criticism to say, well, they must have been secreting something about that person.
Yes.
And
yes.
then you say, okay, even if that is true, I looked up and saw in an underground cellar, I looked up at the ceiling, which was obviously black, dark. There was no light source at all. And I saw stars. And they began to get brighter and come down to what I thought would be the height of the ceiling. Is that if I stood up and reached up, I felt I could touch them.
Yeah.
And my conclusion was very clever. The guy has installed a planetarium using light fiber optic cables, and somebody's sitting following a computer program in which the planets and the stars are swooping around apparently above their heads. That's how skeptical I was.
Yeah, I would be the same.
And the problem was they came down to almost head height and continued to sweep around the room, and then began to touch participants, objects, levitate them, go into, can you pass me the crystal that's under your background folder? They went in, the orbs went into objects like this white quartz crystal,
Yes.
which is here.
Ah, yes.
And shone from inside it. So I bought the bloody crystal, took it home, put it into my darkened seance room, and it still glowed.
Right.
A week later. And I could almost read text if I held it beside it. That's how much the luminosity was. And then, of course, you get things like people being physically touched, including me. Everybody was saying, well, I've just been touched by these orbs and by invisible hands and so on. And I said, with a slightly petted lip, which no one could see because it was dark, no one's touched my.
Not quite strictly true that nobody could see you, because these energy lights lit up the room. I could see the people the other side of the coffee table.
Yeah.
I could see their features.
Yeah.
And I also know you well enough to know about the petted lip business. There's no doubt about that.
Robin Foy said, put out your hand. And I went like that.
Right.
And a light that was on the other side of the group shot round, touched the palm of my hand repeatedly, and then hovered beside it. And I said, is it okay if I clasp it in both my hands? And Robin said, yeah. So I turned my hand, put the other hand on top, and went like that. And I could feel it bouncing about like a little rubber ball. But I was turning my hands to make sure that there was no line attached.
Yes.
My fingers. And the light was coming out from between my fingers. And then I thought, maybe I'm trapping it or distressing it or something. So I opened my hands and it popped up, shone the light in my face, and zoomed off again to the other side of the room. Now, there is no holographic, conjuring, planetarium special effects that can do that.
No.
And of course, I'm only touching on a few seconds of experience.
Mm.
We were there for 2 hours with phenomena on 2 different occasions, making it about 4 hours. And it's, it is mind-blowing.
Yeah, it was quite sustained for quite some time. Are you aware of any of the procedures? I mean, of course, we always hear about what happened, but do we get to hear what doesn't happen? I mean, was there incidents where it didn't perform, or there were things that didn't happen, or was it successful every time?
Robin Foy claimed that every single sitting had phenomena. Sometimes maybe just a light phenomena, and at other times there were apports and various mediumistic.
Varied from meeting to meeting.
Yeah, sort of traditional seance phenomena, which we were used to. But no, Scole was on another level beyond traditional phenomena. And I can't think, if we were there in total for, say, 4 hours, over 2 visits for 2 hours.
Actually in the cellar for 4 hours, but we were on the premises for much longer, because you were there beforehand for a meeting, to have your jewellery removed, everything like that.
Yes.
We went in with no metal and it was all locked up and safe. And we were taken into the room after Nick had checked it one by one. So it wasn't a case you were in like a herd going in there. And we were just suggested seats that you would sit in.
Right.
And I've thought, not so much in recent years, but I've thought round about the time that it happened, how the hell is that possible? Because it was way beyond what I had come to expect from spiritualist seances. And I've never been able to come up with an answer. I even considered group hypnosis, right? Which not every skeptic would even accept as a valid kind of response. So one of our group from Scotland is a professional hypnotherapist. And he went specifically to see if the sitters were being hypnotized. So he was aware of various techniques. They weren't used. He had his own technique, essentially a ring with a metal spike in it, which he used to close his hand and bring him back through pain to full wakefulness. He never had to use it. And he never saw in the music that was playing sometimes, he never saw anything that worried them or bothered them. But I mean, there's a very basic thing here, Steve, that I want to emphasize. I shook a man's hand and there was no body attached. Now, he's standing, he's talking, and I'm shaking actually Sarah was the person who interacted with him most, and she felt up his arm and there was no body attached, but the voice is still there, the hand is still there, it feels real, it's got the weight and the texture of a human hand. And it happened to me after school as well. And at some point when you decide to leave school and say, so what's happened next? I think you'll find the story becomes even stranger.
Yes, it really does. I know a lot of these, the sittings were done in reduced lighting, or should we say light deprivated areas. But was that a condition of Robin's or a condition that was requested by the interaction of phenomena? I'm just curious.
I can't remember actually, Steve, because one of the things was we had to be able to sit in darkness, even if it was only for a short while, and we wouldn't become very unsettled or unhappy or very uncomfortable, which wasn't an issue for any of us. I do remember being asked about that. Will you be okay, even if it is for a short while? But I don't know if it was Robin's request or the group.
From the spirit.
Was it from the spirit team? Oh,
Robin said in a sort of seminar presentation prior to the sittings that they had met as a different group of people, maybe half a dozen of them, and it hadn't been particularly successful, certainly not spectacularly and reliably successful. But once they ended up with just his wife Sandra and Robin himself and the two deep trance mediums, Alan and Diana Bennett, they had a period where the phenomena built up, and then they had 3 years of sittings for the invited members of the research and scientific community. The reason why I was invited and Sarah was because I was the president of the Scottish SPR, and the SPR in London had 3 investigators in full time. Well, not full, part time, but over 3 years. They had a lot of contact. So I went in with a very rigorous kind of scrutiny, and I can't think of anything that concerned or bothered me, and I was looking for it. Your question was, were there times when really nothing happened? As far as Sarah and I are concerned, in the 2 visits, there was only a few minutes in which we were waiting for phenomena to build up and become we'd see the lights, but not very often or not very many times. And it would take a few minutes, then we'd see more lights and they'd be more brightly illuminated. So it was actually the waiting game. During the second visit, the mediums said, allegedly on behalf of the spirit team, we're going to try an experiment the likes of which we've never done. We're going to open ourselves up to other communicators with whom we do not normally have access. And we don't know what's going to happen. But we've agreed to try it. Our spirit team are willing to try it. And there was a period, Sarah will correct me if I got it wrong, but it was approximately 15 minutes in which we were waiting for this new type of communicator or level of communication to take place. But when it did, oh my God, spacecraft materializing in the middle of the air, multiple shapes flying around, interacting with sitters in ways that they're highly intelligent. And one of the things that I find it difficult to describe is, let's visualize a coffee table with 3 or 4 objects on it and 10 visitors, and we'll ignore the 4 mediums, the host for a moment. As these flying objects were going around in 3-dimensional objects, they would some of them had little lights sticking down. And if they focused, for example, on your face as a sitter, it would fly around the whole room, but never lose its focus on your face. While other lights underneath this saucer type shape might pick up this crystal on the coffee table, and if it zoomed on, if it focused on that, it would fly around the room in circles to various bits of the room, but never lose the target shape. And there were 3 or 4 lights doing that with sitters' faces, with objects, and elsewhere in the room. And these lights were not like the spherical all-round illumination of the first visit. They began to become more like little torchlights with a focused beam. So I don't want to go on and on about it.
Yes,
If you want the detail.
Well, I've got a few questions I want to pinpoint, I want to home in on here now. So we can establish that if we were talking physics here, that during this experience for you and Sarah, that you'd witness things which might fall under the metaphysical aspect, that there are clearly times during these experiences for you both that the phenomena presented itself in a physical way, and also being able to switch and become a non-physical way, ideally in the essence of being able to pass through solid items, but maybe, like you say, you can feel some mass in your hand from holding one of these things. So this physicality there, this mass is physical.
Yes.
That's the physics that we understand within the world that we do. However, what about when they go through tables and things? Because there's a number of people which have been interviewed in regarding Scole and what they experienced, and you're not the only person to be able to say, look, I saw lights, they bounced on the table, and then it went through. This seems to be this demonstration of this metaphysical switch in between the physical aspect of what we understand and the non-physical aspect that we all are curious about, but contained within one incident, one item, one object, a demonstration to show, in a sense, that it is pliable to be within our reality and also step out of it when they want to. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with it, but I wasn't impressed, and I don't normally talk about lights going through coffee tables, and here's the reason. It's relatively easy to fake that. Have a light coming down towards the table, you have a second light under the table switched off. When your first light seems to go through the table, the second light gets switched on and gets pulled out, and with a plopping sound, it looks as if the first light has gone down and under and become the second light, but it's a bit of amateur conjuring maybe. Now, I don't think that's what was happening at school. But if I had to provide a rational explanation, it would
Yes.
be these things can be made to look as if they're passing through solid objects.
But wasn't there also the aspect of some of these objects passing into people?
Well,
Now,
That's me.
I know Sarah had an incident of that. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about that incident, Sarah.
Yes, the energy balls that were that creamy greeny color flying about there, and you are mesmerized by these things, Steve. There's no doubt about it, because your rational, logical mind is saying, "How is this happening?" Because if I can't give it, then it's something out with my realm of understanding. And pardon me, you could see these lights rushing up to people and moving about at high speed. And it did come up, as I've said before to some people, come up to my midriff. And I can look down and see this here, almost as if it was a tiny little dancing ball of this creamy green energy. And then this pop.
And did you hear a pop? Or when you say pop, do you hear a pop or a sensation?
Steve, that's the interesting bit. Because whatever it was went into me, and it was that feeling that something crossed over.
Okay.
Which is, I know you're going to think, yeah.
So let me just. So you this light is here.
Yes, and then it disappeared.
It goes in.
It goes into my midriff.
Right. Do you have any sensation of physicality within your body of this?
Yes, that was
that's interesting, because this is the same aspect that I'm talking about. It doesn't matter if it's bouncing on the table and going through, but seemingly it's non-physical to be able to enter. But leaves a physicality within you, so you feel it.
So what happened was, it was as if something inside was scratching or doing that to try and get out again. Now we're talking seconds, we're not talking minutes here. Maybe 20, 30 seconds maximum. But I could feel that it was like tickling.
Yeah.
On the inside.
And you were squealing, not in pain.
It was, Steve. Honestly, how ridiculous. And people were going, "It's gone into her." And I thought, I know it's in here. And then pop. And that time there was most definitely a pop.
Okay, interesting.
And out it came.
Okay.
And on its merry way.
Yes, right.
Well, I've had objects come out of my chest in hospital with a pop, and they were the drains for my chest cavity during a heart operation, and it bloody hurt, Steve. So if she can smile and laugh and giggle and squeal and not experience any pain, there is more to be analysed here.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Physically in and out.
These popping sounds, I've only heard talk of them a few times, but not in association to light phenomena coming out of an individual, but in the essence of exorcisms and the departure of something which we can't label really, but something which has allegedly taken over somebody, and that departure has been documented that there is sometimes a popping sound. I don't know if it's just coincidence or there's something to that. I really don't know. But if you're saying there is a sound of a popping sound of this, it's interesting how, what creates that sound, and is the sound coming from the actual object as it passes through, or it's just an environmental sound in association to something is changed in the environment. It's a bit mysterious, but it is interesting that you'd say that. So what I'm getting at here is that, just like I asked Nick about maybe is there evidence of this metaphysicality, there is evidence definitely within your experience, Sarah, in regarding it's non-physical to enter, but you feel a physical part of this. So it's like it's physical or non-physical, and this is what we get with this type of phenomena all the time, this confusion between the non-physicality and the physicality of what we understand.
For me, also after when we talked about everything afterwards, and they asked, for me to describe what had actually happened to me. And the group of Rob and Sandra said that the language I used was just like what others had described. Now, I hadn't been aware that that had happened to other people, but I was using the same terms, you know, the feeling as if something was tickling or scratching to get out again. And that was completely independent of other people. I don't know how often this happened, but it has happened a few times, that's all I can say.
I believe that. I mean, I think I have about several recordings from Scole with other individuals which have talked about very similar things. Certainly what Nick said about being able to capture an object or light source in the hand and can feel physical mass. That was also been talked about.
And nothing attached.
Nothing attached, no.
In our world, you could string up an LED on some very fine nylon that fishermen might use, and you could, with an antenna type rod, you could swing it around in little circles and place it accurately on something. But you always have to have that line of attachment.
Yes, you'd feel it.
In the late 1990s, I don't think you would have the sophistication to do it via mini drones or anything.
That's right. And there were also other people who were recorded stating that the light phenomena went into them.
Oh, right.
Yes. There was one particular woman who had a bad knee, for an example. She claimed not only did it go into her knee, but it healed. It felt a lot better. It healed the knee in some cases. And it was a small, described as a small light. Intelligent, though. It seemed to act intelligent. These aren't just lights, that's what she said, are just seemingly just flying around it randomly. They seem to show intelligent maneuvers.
Yes.
Would you agree with that? Yeah, intelligent maneuvers.
If we see in total there were several dozen lights during the two visits, not one hit or injured or inflicted painful contact with any of the sitters, because they would have told us, they would have reacted. One of the things that I would want your audience to realise is they might be sitting there saying, okay, so you're sitting in a darkened room and you see a few lights you can't explain. Big deal. When I was getting ready to go down into the room at Scole, I said to Robin with an air of expectation, so are we going to have some lights on so we can see what's happening? And he laughed and he said, no, there will be no electric lights or any other kind of lights, no candles. No. He said, but don't worry, Nick, Spirit will light up the room for you. And I laughed because I thought, how ridiculous is that? That's exactly what happened. Okay, the lights weren't dazzling. They didn't light up every aspect of the room. They were intermittent and not necessarily regular in the pulsing light. But I could see everyone sitting around the table every few seconds as the lights passed them by. And yeah, I would accept as a generalization. Spirit lit up that room on two occasions. I could see the furniture. I could see the dimensions of the room. I could see other people. And not one light seemed to go out of control. Now,
that's interesting.
I used to do fly fishing as a younger man, and I could place a fly on top of an object within 2 or 3 attempts. And I know, therefore, how difficult it is to achieve the kind of maneuverability. Had these been LEDs, it's not. Yes. It's just not honest. It's not a reasonable attempt to explain it. But I've gone through those kind of processes.
So the light phenomenon, I mean, because when we talk about light doesn't have weight. It's light. So I'm curious as to, well, what is it? It's emitting light then, as we would say. So we're looking at luminous and illumination here. We're talking about the process of something which is being capable of producing or emitting a wattage of light enough to illuminate a given surface at a given distance, which is just kind of normal physics. But we know that under normal physics that light doesn't have a weight value in this sense. So, but if we are feeling mass or something to it, it's like, well, there's something, it's emitting the light, the illumination from this, whatever these things are. We don't know what those things are, but there have been reports of various different sizes and shapes. That wasn't the only things that were to be seen in this. Now, I was curious that, how did it, you're immersed into this experience. You must be thinking to yourselves, did Robbie know that this was achievable? Do you think that he knew that, I kept this quiet, but I know I've been there and I've seen this and it's achievable and I want to share that experience with you? Or otherwise, was he like, I'm shocked, I'm surprised, I didn't expect this to happen?
Not at all. Not the latter. Robin, for the first visit, the kind of phenomena that we experienced was a sample of what he had been experiencing for 3 years.
Right.
Second visit was not expected. He said it was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and having had our first visit, we were told we would not be invited to another one.
We only got one invitation.
Yeah, and then 6 months later he phoned up and said, can you come back? And I reminded him of the restriction they'd imposed, and he said, yeah. I said, we thought that as well, but the spirit team say they want to try an experiment, and they want 5 people from Scotland and 5 people from England that they have already been to contribute energy to that process. Now, right. I don't rate myself as any great medium, but I have been called by several people a good energy builder. Mm-hmm. So I could understand that spiritual way of thinking.
Yes.
And I think that's what happened. And I don't think Robin exactly knew what was going to happen, because he said it was the first experiment of its kind. But as you will know, they did have humanoid or non-human beings captured in video and in stills and communicating telepathically sometimes, and through direct voice and mediums at other times. Now, we didn't experience that kind of photographic or video experience. I'm prepared to believe that there were entities and not just deceased persons. But that's not an aspect of the Scole story that we can personally validate. However, once you go on in your interview to what's happened after Scole, you'll find that Scole is not unique.
No, it isn't. No, I agree with that.
I think, to go back to your question, did Robin anticipate or no? Robin placed the 10 people who were sitting in the cellar. So he put us in order going in, and the seat beside Robin, in between the seat beside Robin and him, there was a table with the music, very upbeat marching type music.
Yes, band music. Yeah.
Yes, And what none of us knew is that particular seat was commonly called the hot seat. And that most, pardon me, if something was going to happen, it would happen mostly to that person.
Yes.
Now, one of the other people from Scotland was asked to sit in that seat, and she refused.
Oh.
But we didn't know that was the hot seat.
Do you know why she refused, or was she?
No, I don't know, and I think afterwards she regretted.
Well, yes, yeah.
And so I was given that opportunity. So that particular seat, he was able to explain afterwards, is the seat that things were going to happen. It was in that seat that most things would happen to.
So what happened?
Well,
I know.
So you sat in the hot, as we say, the hot seat. I know,
hot seat, indeed. But I thought that was quite interesting. So you're sitting beside the music, and beside Robin. And in many ways, probably it was a good idea because he had an idea of what was going to happen. So for somebody like me who didn't, and being a female and sometimes squealing, which was uncontrollable, he was able to say, no, it's fine. You're fine. Don't worry.
Right.
So you can understand them.
Yes.
So what happened in the hot seat?
The light phenomena popping in.
What else happened?
That was where the seat where I
Levitated.
Now, you levitated from the seat, or you with the seat?
The chair levitated.
With you on it?
On it.
Okay.
Now, this cellar with 14 people, I think I may have explained to some others as well, where we were sitting, there wasn't room to get anyone round the outside between you and the wall of the cellar.
Okay.
So maybe there was this space, there wasn't even 15 centimeters.
Okay, so let me just say this while I remember.
Right.
There is a story connected with Scole in regarding the chairs, the people, the sitters being bilocated to another slightly different location within the cellar. But that can't be that cellar, can it? It can't be that particular location because there wouldn't be enough room to do that. There are stories circulating, and I always like to get clear about has icing been added on the cake somewhere?
Yes.
You know, because I've been hearing a few people, and this is how it happens, doesn't it? Somebody says something, takes it verbatim, and before you know it, they're telling people, "Oh yes, there was a time when the sitters, the chair, the table, everything was bilocated to another part, or the other side of the room," and they didn't realise until the light kind of came back on. And I'm thinking now, with what you're telling me, I thought, okay. I did suspect that, but I just wanted to make that clear.
Well, I can validate that, but not at Scole.
Not at Scole.
Okay, so some people are getting mixed up then.
I suspect that's what's happening, Steve.
Okay, I understand then. Okay.
Because there was absolutely no way, because you didn't enter the room and sit in your seat by going behind the seat. You had to go in front of your seat to sit down, and there was little space between you and the coffee table.
But okay. Another way to think about this. If you think about the seating being in approximately a circle, maybe an oval, and think of it in terms of the stations of a hand of a clock going round. So there'd be a seat at 12, another seat at 1 and 2 and 3 and so on. Not at Scole, but after Scole, I was in a group who reported to me that on an occasion when I wasn't with them, they all changed position and none of them were aware of moving. But it was the person in, say, seat 1 that woke up or had the light put on, and suddenly they were in seat 4, and everyone else had moved round, but not to another part of the room. They hadn't been aware of changing the position of their seat. And maybe something like that happened at Scole. I couldn't say. But
I couldn't find anything, and that's why I wanted to, whilst you were talking about positioning and in this room, that there wasn't much room to be moving around, that suddenly came into mind, and I thought I wanted to get some clarity on that because I couldn't find any information about that. And as far as I'm aware, the whole point about the cellar in Scole was it was a managed area, just about so that you purposely couldn't get other people in. Maybe that was done for reasons.
But hence why, and as I say, I was sitting beside, pardon me, Robin with that little table with, I think it was a cassette recorder. That's dating me, isn't it? And that's it. And pardon me, a friend of mine was sitting next to me. And then the lady who had refused to take the hot seat was beside that. So why these 15 centimeters or so between the back of the chair? And that was important to me because there was no one behind me moving my chair.
Yes,
and it didn't matter anyway because people could see my chair being right back up on its back 2 legs, and I had no control. The guy sitting beside me bent down and was able to put his hands underneath the front legs, between that and the floor, and again it was up. But I had no control at all, Steve. It literally just rose, and that was it.
Was this a gradual or was it sudden, you say?
It wasn't. It didn't go, but it just moved up steady. And again, maybe, I don't know, half a minute. It seemed a long time, but things like that do appear long when you have no control. And again, the guy next to me was saying, she's off the ground. But other people could see it because of the lights. And it wasn't me. And again, there was no one behind, somehow magically holding on to the back of the chair. But I could wriggle my legs.
Right.
Then things had happened, and I was less alarmed or less surprised.
Right. Okay. So the physical items are being manipulated.
Yes.
Did you at any time witness the physical manipulation on objects which might have been on the table or anything like that?
We saw the effects of the manipulation rather than how it was done. A Pyrex type bowl lifted off the coffee table, and what I remember is a light going inside the bowl and illuminating it from the inside. But, and this is where I have to turn to Sarah, did that bowl overturn so it was upside down?
Was upside down.
So the bowl lifted off from its surface, turned,
and then turned,
and then landed on its surface.
But this was all, this wasn't a rapid movement.
Yeah, not landed on its surface immediately, hovered in the air, upside down,
and then
with the light shining through it.
Okay, and this is just a glass Pyrex bowl, would you say? Or it's not a dome, because I know they did with the dome, didn't they? But it's a different thing.
A casserole dish.
Yeah.
A casserole. Oh my God.
They have a dome, a glass dome from Scole that we purchased. They said that Spirit needed an element of air pressure to connect to produce the phenomenon, the light phenomenon. And what they said was that the glass dome had a wooden base with a couple of holes in it. Spirit would go into the glass dome through the holes in the base, do their thing with regard to the lights, and it was the pressure of the glass holding that space that allowed the lights to kind of manifest, as it were. And then the lights would come through the glass. They didn't go back down through the base. Now, in 10 years of using a glass dome, we never saw that.
No.
So there might be an element of technology or equipment was used at Scole that was only for them.
Right. Yes. Okay.
But there was nothing obvious, Steve.
No.
That was the whole thing. And I just imagine if you have 10 pairs of eyes looking in different directions, and skeptics like Nick and the guy that was sitting beside me and our other friend, who were looking to see if everything wasn't maybe strictly as it should be. They were consciously looking, thinking and wondering.
Well, I mean, I totally get it. I mean, it would be, the management of this would be a hoaxer's nightmare.
Oh, yes.
Because look, you might pull off one item, but which you do, that's all what a hoaxer's going to do, is going to make you focus on one item and you convince yourself that, yes, this is paranormality. They are not going to systematically keep creating things, because the more you create, the more problematics there are. And it's just because when you look at the whole thing that's taken place here, you think it's beyond a management of being able to hoax.
I think so.
Yeah, and that's what fascinates me. Now
there were bells hanging from the ceiling.
I
think of them as cowbells, some sort of leather bells. But they might not have been like that. It might have been somebody else holding them. But there was a row of bells, and if you tapped them, they would tinkle, and you would hear them. Now they frequently were rattling and making bell sounds. And we could see with the light in the room, especially the light sort of whizzing around about them, that there were no one was standing up and reaching across and trying to hit them with a stick, for example, wherever they would get that from. I didn't really pay attention to the bells because that's what I'm used to. I'm used to seance phenomena in which a bell is hanging and gets touched.
Yes.
I was looking at the stuff that I had never seen before.
Yeah.
I couldn't explain, and it kept happening.
Before we get to the pinnacle parts of some of these experiences that you had, I wanted to ask, when was it for you both when Scole became into the public domain? When did you first hear about Scole? And I'm asking this question reasonably because by the time it reaches to the public domain, I was curious how much work had been carried out beforehand to get there. You know, because for most people it just seems to boom, it just explodes onto the scene.
We knew Scole weeks before we visited, only because we were invited, and for us Scole was a geographical address of a group that could reliably produce spiritualist phenomena, particularly light phenomena. And that was about it. We didn't do Google searches in those days, but there were no books out that we could read, no magazine articles.
No.
I was very friendly with the late medium and healer Albert Best. And I told Albert that physical phenomena to me was the gold standard of spirit communication or mediumship. And he kind of nodded and understood why I said that. And I said, so Albert, with your extensive experience, spiritualist of the year back in the day, with your network of contacts, is there a group anywhere in the world, but particularly in the UK, that's reliably producing inexplicable spiritualist phenomena? And he said, I can't really think of any that would allow you to visit. He said, and that it's very rare. Yes, there are a few groups, he said, but they wouldn't entertain a stranger because it would affect their work and the phenomena.
Yes.
He said, but there is one group that's open to the public in Norfolk. He said, so I'll write you a letter of introduction and it might get you through the door, because they are open to researchers and investigators and so on. And then Albert died before he wrote the letter. It was just a few weeks later that we were invited by a mutual friend. He said, oh, there's this group in Norfolk. I said, yeah, I've heard about them. I'd only heard about them from Albert,
But he was part of, that mutual friend was part of our home circle.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, very quiet, and we can understand people don't publicize this.
Well, no, I mean,
up to criticism.
I totally get that. I mean, because I think most people just seem to think that it kind of just explodes onto the scene. But knowing the way these procedures work is that it usually takes a considerable length of time to build up your circle, to get the right people involved, to trial and error, to a point where you're comfortable to even release to the public. So you consider, okay, so stuff must have been going on. It must be happening beforehand to get to the point of where it suddenly explodes onto the scene. And those are the dark areas where people ask those questions and don't really know anything. You say, well, we don't know. I mean, we assume by the process of seance that they must have been doing this for some time and fine-tuning it, the circle, the process, and they had some agreement at some point to say, okay, I think we should release information to the general public, and that's kind of when it explodes onto the public domain.
I would need to look back at my notes because it is 20 odd years ago, but it's my strong impression that Scole had been meeting as an unsuccessful group of about 6 or 7. Then it became a group of 4, and they began to have more phenomena. And they had met for 2 or just over 2 years before we went. And in those 2 and a bit years, I wasn't aware of anything in the public domain.
Right. And
I
yeah.
went with a fresh kind of attitude. I'd seen lots of phenomena, but not convincing every time. And I was very comfortable to go into a spiritualist circle, but I didn't expect what happened. And indeed, up to that point in my life, I'd never experienced anything like it because it was so outrageously in your face.
Yes. But you were no stranger to it, though. You wasn't like you suddenly. I often think
in my home circle, I've experienced shafts of light and little orbs blinking on and off, very small, and only a few of them. And I could see in Scole, we got accurate clairvoyance from the mediums while all this stuff was going on.
Yes, simultaneously.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I can give you an example. It's very quick to describe it. Sarah has a phobia about snakes.
Oh, right. Okay.
We went to cheap accommodation in an inn or something before we went to the Scole Experiment. And there was a boa constrictor on an aquarium tank outside the bedroom.
Oh.
That the owner owned, and Sarah freaked and started stuffing towels under the bedroom door and said she couldn't sleep and all the rest of it. Now we said nothing because I was embarrassed. I don't know about Sarah, but I just thought this is ridiculous. And during that seance, the medium said, "Oh, spirit are having a laugh." They said they were aware of what was happening with you last night. They mentioned Sarah's reaction. Did they mention the actual snake?
Oh yeah, and the fact I was within one, Steve, of getting up and going downstairs, as you see in cartoons with my back to the wall, and it was a locked cage that this thing was in, and don't laugh, and sleeping in the car. I literally lay in bed like that. It was horrendous, but for just the fact, no one. I mean, he just said, "I'm stupid."
The only communication between
not even the people that we were with, because he was very embarrassed, and I just felt stupid because logically this could not get out of a locked cage. That was a rational explanation, but it wasn't doing me any good at all. And I came in the conversation about how they had a laugh, about how I was reacting, and that I was thinking of going to sleep in the car.
This is interesting because it separates the seance process to pre-seance environmental monitoring by the phenomena, which is kind of okay, and then I'll bring that information to the science, in a sense of speaking. So it's prior knowledge obtained and brought to the seance then, in a sense.
Unless it was telepathically accessed when Sarah was at the as a memory.
Yes, that's
one of the details, Steve, which is rarely reported, I think it is in Robin Foy's book, maybe Witnessing the Impossible, is when the experiment portal, whatever you want to call it, was opened up and we were waiting for communicators, the first thing that I noticed was it was as if someone had a laser pen, and I saw someone draw. I didn't see someone. I saw a line being drawn from the point A to point B with a blue laser. And
did you see the line of the laser?
Yes.
Or was it just a point?
No, I didn't see the line of the laser. I only saw a line being drawn, as it were, or appearing to go from point A to point B in the mid-air. And I saw another line beyond it, and then a line going down vertically, just as if someone with an invisible pen or a laser pen was drawing it. And as soon as it was drawn as a three-dimensional shape, it filled with a bluish luminescence. I thought that was interesting.
It is interesting.
Because it suggests that it was a creation,
yes,
maybe by hand or by technology, and then it became solid.
Yes. like a construct, a created construct. You know, we deal with archetypes and constructs, so it's some type of construct that was created,
Yeah.
And that was before, that was the initiator, the first thing you really experienced there.
Yeah. And then more craft came in that I didn't see.
The second setting, yeah.
This is the second set.
Second
More
setting.
craft came in, and that I didn't see being created in front of us. But that first one, that was a bit like a wedge of cake or cheese. It had a bulbous curved end going to a triangular or prismatic point.
Right. Okay. So, and as you moved in further into, I mean, I don't think this is a second sitting for you. We'll touch on what I would refer to as those pinnacle areas of experiences that you had. There was the feeling of presence and the physicality. Now, I know you've talked about this, and I wanted to home in about, you know, when you talk about, you know, it's hard to wrap your head around, because people are suffering with this physical or not physical process, you know, because it doesn't fit into our known reality, the non-physics aspects of this, and yet we're experiencing it. So we go from shaking the hand of an individual that is thought to be spirit, and it feels physical and doesn't feel clammy or cold, Nick. The hand, it just feels like a normal hand. And then at some point there's a realism for you that we have just defied physics. We have just defied the law and understanding of physics here as you're feeling up the arm. There was that point of change, wasn't there?
Yeah. In my rush to get out from my own experience quickly for you, in my head I was recounting an experience I had after school, just the shaking of the hand. But the reason why I did that was because I saw it happening with Sarah. So a man materializing in front of Sarah, but I'm focusing on the hand.
So you saw a gentleman,
yes,
manifest, appear,
yes,
in a physical sense, would you say, or?
For me, it was like, if you imagine someone put a cutout that was black in the shape of a person, and as the lights whizzed by it, they stopped, disappeared, and then reappeared. Yeah. And there were so many lights going around that you could tell it was a man, his approximate height, quite sort of well built, tall, and I could see him leaning forward to speak to Sarah.
Now, was he in a location where he could have been, if physical, freestanding without any obstacles in his way, or would he have been partially?
It would have been very, very tight, Steve, because in front of me with this table and the cassette player and the coffee table, so a very tight situation that you could see. But you said you saw that there were actually the two, and the one that shook hands with me was more a greyish black outline, as opposed to what I'm seeing with you just now, in the sort of the skin tone, etc. And very friendly, chatting away, and asking then, would I like to shake hands?
Right, and do you hear them as normal human voices?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
With interpretation and maybe accent or anything?
From where I was sitting, it was more like a whisper that I could tell it was a man's voice. But for Sarah, who was inches away, it was clearer.
Very, very clear.
But just to be clear, I saw that happening to Sarah, and then subsequently it happened to me, but not at school, where a man materialized in front of me. I couldn't see him clearly because it was in blackout conditions, but he offered me his handshake. He was speaking a perfectly normal Liverpudlian accent, actually. And I took his hand and I shook it and I squeezed it. I've got quite a strong handshake, as you might have noticed. And I squeezed it, and it was, I would say 100% sure, it was the hand of a male human being. And I asked him, is it okay if I feel up your arm? And he burst out laughing. And he said, sure. and my hand got as far as the upper part of the bicep, just about to go into the shoulder, and then it went through that body space because there was no body attached. Meanwhile, the hand is still shaking mine, and I've just grabbed the arm, and on the way down, I touched it.
Okay, so you're seeing this figure. Are you seeing this figure? Yeah.
And which one are we talking
The
about?
one where you're shaking the hand, or are you just
For me.
No,
are you
no.
just shaking the hand, or
I'm shaking the hand. The person speaking to me as if they're inches from my face.
but yet you can't see them? Yeah.
Basically, yes. There might have been a tiny amount of light to allow me to be aware of a shape, but I would
Okay.
prefer to say I couldn't see the person.
Okay, so really then we're looking at something like a partial manifestation.
Yes.
Yeah. Of the part that's interacting with yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't want to jump ahead away from school, but I also had a spirit child visit me twice. First time partial materialization, second time full body, jumped into my lap. I felt the weight of the child's body, and then he left. So that's what I mean when I say things happen after school.
Yes.
Are not in the public domain because we don't normally talk about it.
But to go back to the school situation where these two people formed within the group, everybody else knew there was at least one, if not, but there were definitely two. So I can't remember confirming with them. But again, the person saying asking, would I like to shake hands with him? And taking out my right hand to his. I mean, I knew where to put it, but then you would obviously, because just by the fact you know a human body, and shaking hands. And he made the invitation, would I like to touch the rest of his arm? So I moved my left hand up, and it was at the elbow, although there was a physical, I could see a person at the elbow. There was nothing. It went right through.
Right. Okay. So
the only bit that was tangible for me to touch, that when you actually did it, was from was really the elbow down to the hand. But again, one would not have said it was a rubber hand or anything like that. It was just a human hand, but only that far.
So the rigidity, I think what we can learn from all this is the rigidity that we have in the reality that we understand is that there is this clear divide between the physical and non-physical, where it really shouldn't lie. It seems that the phenomena can seemingly govern the aspects of physicality when it choose to, or some of the phenomena does. Certainly when it manifests, seems to be physical, but that applies kind of all sorts of different things throughout the various forms of phenomena, be it the apparitions that seemingly can walk through walls and yet prod you. So, physical or non-physical. In the alien abduction world, we would say yes, they seemingly come through windows and ceilings and things, and yet can lift an individual from the bed. Again, and we also see this in the cryptid world as well. So it seems that there's this area of strange metaphysics that are involved between what we are currently understanding in physics and what there is vastly different. And then some of the experiments which have been carried out, just to touch on very briefly, that Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories did, is to have items taken like a marble and placed inside a glass box, and without the only way for the marble to get into this box would be before it had to transition through the actual materials. In other words, it kind of wasn't physical at the time and then manifested to physicality again, which led them through to the movement of a small glass vase. And it's only a miniature vase, but it was a small glass vase which was moving. Now they noted paranormal movement in 3 different ways. There was the shunt, the rail, and what they called the squid. The squid, the shunt, the rail. Very strange names. But the squid means that it could fly off in change direction in flight. You know, if you were to throw an item, you'd expect it to traverse a normal position, but apparently not so with this squid movement. It can turn and maneuver. The rail is the most common. It tends to be from point A to point B in a simple strand of place. And then the shunt, where there is movement of these items, but it's shunted in steps. So you can actually physically see the little steps it's taking, movements. They noted 3 of those, but they had this in the rail movement process, the small vase to move across. But by request and communications with, well, they're not saying with what, they're saying the intelligences, through request, they were able to get to a point where they couldn't pick up the vase. Though that the vase was there, they could shine light upon it and it would reflect light. It was light reflecting in a physical sense, as if it's there. It was shadow reflective, in other words, in the physical sense, but not there to pick up in the physical sense. So they attempted to pick it up a few times. The only thing they reported was no coldness as they moved the fingers through the items, no tingling sensations, no magnetic anomalies, no radiation anomalies, nothing out of the normal characteristics of the environment, in that laboratory environment. Except for the fact is that when they draw the fingers through the item, they could see a very, very microscopic layer of film around their fingers as it passed through the object. Now they were trying to determine, or wondering if that's something that protects the physicality of our cells in our hands or fingers to not mix with the vase, and that somehow it's protected by that film. They're unsure, they don't know, it's a micro layer. But it was very interesting that they really started to home in on the aspects of control over the physical and the non-physics. This item is ours. It's only our reality. So basically what they've done is they've focused on this, the phenomena, and made it non-physical in our environment of what is ours. We're not talking something which is, you know, created by phenomena. It's an item which has seemingly changed its transposition.
I think that the communication with the spirit team, so-called, that the Scole mediums were able to achieve was initially with deceased persons. Some of them were historical figures that, that the subsequent research found that they did live their lives and die as they said. And it was that spirit team, roughly half a dozen of them in the spirit world, that went on to say, let's see if we can give you access to dimensions to which we do not normally have access.
Okay, so basically very similar then, isn't it? Dimensions to we don't have access to intelligences in these realities. So basically very similar wording, none of which are saying let's talk to aliens. Okay,
exactly, and the word's never used.
No, exactly, and I think there's a reason for that. I'm not too sure what it is yet, but I think there's a reason for it.
Well, of course, they did get Blue, and they got them on video repeatedly communicating, speaking, materializing in a way that allowed them to be filmed. They used that psychomantium process, which I've never really used, but Scole weren't the only group to use it.
I want to thank you for watching this particular episode, and it's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it? And I've experienced some of these things, and believe me, it took me a while to settle at night after a while, trying to wrap my head around what I'd experienced. It really does blow your mind, doesn't it? But we will be back with a part 2 of this shortly. I hope you enjoyed it, and please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Give it a thumbs up. It's really important, and of course if there's any questions in the comments, we will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Thank you again for watching.